through? All right. So I'm Olivia, and give me just a second while yes, that works. Okay, so I'm a restoration program manager with the Freshwater Trust. We are an environmental nonprofit with a mission to preserve and restore freshwater ecosystems. We've been around about 40 years. I've been with TFT for just over 10, and we were founded around wild salmon. That's really core to what we do. We work in Oregon, Idaho, California, Colorado, and a bit in Washington. We have about 50-something staff now, and we're a motley crew of restoration practitioners, but we also have legal staff, policy and finance wonks, app developers, data engineers, and analysts. So in this presentation tonight, I'm going to try to cobble together a couple different concepts that I hope will highlight for you many of the ways that the Upper Willamette Shade Program is a bit different than other approaches to riparian reforestation in some ways, but we feel that it connects to our collective effort. Everybody in this virtual room, I would guess, our collective effort to move high impact conservation and restoration forward. So the program itself is an effort to replant native riparian forest at 20 to 30 projects over the next 4 years or so. And then we will maintain and monitor those projects for 20 years each. You're seeing a map of our program area in the Upper Willamette. We're in 4 subbasins, the McKenzie subbasin, also the Coast Fork Willamette, Middle Fork Willamette, and then the Long Thumb. And this program is funded by the Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission, the MWMC, which I'm sure is familiar to many of you as the wastewater treatment utility for Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County. And this is what is known as a water quality trading program to offset their thermal exceedance. I'll say a bit more about water quality trading and why salmon need it. So the Willamette River, as you are all well familiar, is important habitat for salmonids and other species sensitive to water quality. And protecting those species is one beneficial use of this river and its tributaries. And the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, or DEQ, has defined allowable thresholds for various pollutants in the river, including temperature. I'm sorry, let me find my mouse real quick here. There we go. So anyone who discharges water to the river, including the MWMC, has to have a permit and comply with temperature thresholds. If their discharge is too warm, they have a thermal exceedance that they need to address to be in compliance with their permit. So regulation and action of point dischargers like wastewater utilities since the Clean Water Act got up and running on a federal level has resulted in big gains in cleaning up many sources of acute water pollution. There have been some really big improvements in the Willamette River and others. And traditionally, wastewater facilities have cooled discharge using a cooling tower or other built technology. But rivers continue to degrade and remain inadequate to support healthy salmonid populations. So while end of pipe improvements continue to be important, we also need a way to address pollution sources that are distributed throughout the watershed. And this figure that I'm showing here is showing one source of thermal pollution, and that is solar energy reaching the stream after riparian forest canopy has been cleared as part of agriculture, home building, or other historical land uses. And since European American settlement, you know, back in the 1850s, roughly, we've lost about 60% of the riparian forest canopy cover in the lowlands of the Willamette Basin. So in a nutshell, water quality trading, we plant trees that grow shade along the waterway. We use a model maintained by DEQ that can quantify the solar energy blocked by that new tree canopy, and we call it shade credits. And those are in terms of kilocalories, thermal energy. We sell those shade credits to the MWMC, and they use them to offset their thermal exceedance. So essentially, we're funding riparian reforestation projects by selling the shade that they produce. As you know, as you're all aware, unlike a cooling tower, riparian forests do a lot of other great things. They filter excess nutrient runoff, they sequester carbon, they enhance wildlife habitat, and they improve community livability. And of course, those benefits increase as the forest grows. In addition to this particular program I'm talking about today, funded by the MWMC, we do have similar programs with the cities of Medford and Ashland in the Rogue, plus individual projects around the state. So turning to what the program is, you know, where we're funding restoration by selling the shade that they produce, we use those funds to pay for outreach and recruitment of landowners to host projects, planting along the waterway, weed control, lots of weed control before planting, and then also continuing for 20 years after planting. And in addition to weed control, that maintenance can include browse protection of plants, interplanting, and other actions. There is no cost share or work share for landowners. And while much of what I've said is pretty similar to traditional restoration, other than being able to continue stewardship for 20 years, there are extra steps because of the compliance funding. And those include intensive vetting of project sites, long-term performance monitoring, lots of third-party oversight, and reporting to regulators. So, you know, my subtitle of this presentation, you know, planting a tree, but making it really complicated. I guess I was feeling kind of snarky when putting this together. So the question is, why are we using this approach in the first place? Why are we making it so difficult? We believe that shade programs like the one in the Upper Willamette are important for demonstrating a path forward towards bigger funding aimed at tracked results from restoration that we hope are durable far into the future. It's really interesting talking to other nonprofits, policymakers, utilities around the West, and there seems to be really strong alignment. Everyone agrees on the need and value of riparian reforestation. And we helped support some research that's been happening over the last couple years about the importance of, excuse me, riparian restoration as a climate mitigation strategy. There are a lot of recognized benefits. And yet, funding is still piecemeal. It takes a lot of work to get, and it tends to cover only a couple years after planting. So what this program is trying to do, and others like it, is put forests in the ground that will not be swamped with weeds after funding runs out soon after planting. We want to put resilient forests in the ground that are around for centuries. So I'm going to talk briefly about some of the pieces of the Upper Willamette Shade Program that we feel are a bit different from other riparian restoration programs, and why we think that they are important for maximizing durable environmental benefit. And I'll touch on each of the points that you're seeing on the screen there. So the first component, enabling compliance funding to invest in restoration as natural infrastructure. We feel this is a step towards recognizing that forests have meaningful benefit for society at large. And tapping into the compliance funding works because the restoration outcomes are quantified. We can quantify how much water quality improvement is associated with each project and how those projects collectively add up to produce the water quality improvement needed for compliance. There's been a lot of groundwork in Oregon in particular to define project quality standards and build tracking systems that make these projects and their benefits transparent, defensible, and trackable. And that is really essential for for restoration to be used for compliance. Those quality standards and tracking systems are laid out in a water quality treating plan that becomes part of the MWMC's discharge permit and their compliance strategy approved by DEQ. But despite that groundwork that's been laid, these programs must also work for utilities. Utilities must have high certainty and low risk of non-compliance because they're sticking their necks out there. So these programs are very structured. They have built-in safeguards and they have a lot of third-party oversight. And programs must be cost-effective for ratepayers, which I'm sure includes many of you. And in order to choose these restoration programs for compliance, they have to be less expensive than cooling towers. So to maximize the environmental benefit of each project through site prioritization, we feel is really important to make these programs as effective as possible. So even with the ability to tap into compliance funding, there are, of course, still limited resources, limited political will, and limited capacity to implement and manage each one of these projects. So we need every project to be placed and designed for maximum environmental benefit. This is a web map that represents what we do when we start a program. We model every single parcel in the program area in terms of the new shade that could be created if a riparian forest were to be planted. And then we rank every parcel. And this allows us to quickly identify where replanting projects would have the most benefit. This particular map that we're looking at is a quantification of water temperature improvement from new shade, but we can also do this to quantify the pounds of sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus kept from the streams by replanting forests. And we can also quantify temperature improvement from other actions like flow augmentation, getting more water in the streams, and also improvements from some in-stream restoration projects. So we feel that these programs really benefit from the deep expertise of local restoration practitioners at the McKenzie Watershed Council and others with whom we partner to maximize environmental benefit. And these projects are only prioritized in terms of shade. The last slide that we were looking at, our models can only see so much. Local practitioners know the salmon recovery plans, the watershed assessments, plus the needs of this specific place that aren't written down anywhere. And that is essential to help drive projects to the right places. The local staff know the landowners, the agency folks, the partners, and the contractors and the suppliers that all make the projects go. So partnering with the McKenzie Watershed Council has been really important to maximize the environmental benefit of this program. We hope that the SHADE program also brings benefit to the Watershed Council. In terms of the assured funding that we can bring, that skips numerous grant applications. So hopefully it's less administrative hassle and work in that regard. And generally, the Upper Willamette SHADE program represents a close partnership where TFT staff take on some of the more esoteric steps of restoration for compliance, like the legal agreements and negotiations and the modeling and GIS, while the McKenzie Watershed Council and other partners lead steps like landowner outreach, implementation, and stewardship. And a shout out to Andy. Nice to see you, Andy. Landowner outreach rockstar. So speaking of landowners, there is no program without landowner partners. And this way, the SHADE program is no different than many restoration programs. I just can't emphasize enough how important landowner partnerships are to success. And I am deeply grateful for the trust that landowners give us to manage lands that are often their livelihood, their homes, or that they otherwise care about deeply. I also hope that the program brings landowners benefits as well. We do have some constraints, but generally we can work with both private and public landowners. And in terms of private landowners, we can bring capacity and technical expertise. We all know that keeping Himalayan blackberry, knotweed, and other weeds at bay over long periods of time is really hard work. And in addition to that, navigating the requirement to get permits to do that work is not always easy. So besides free work, we do offer landowners a payment of $350 per acre per year for use of the riparian area on their land. When we work with public landowners, such as we're doing with Lane County, and we've started conversations with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, those partners often have interest in doing restoration. They really are behind these projects, but they often don't have dedicated funding and capacity, and these programs can bring that. Okay, the last component that I'll mention in terms of an aspect of this program that we feel is a little different and that is really important for maximizing the benefit of every project that we plant is long-term durability for these forests to withstand all sorts of challenges, to thrive in the long term, which we hope is multiple centuries. So two aspects to that: these projects need to have legal durability. The forests that we plant can only be protected for the long term if they align with existing land agreements. So interestingly, working in the Willamette Valley has been a little bit different than working in other parts of the state. It was settled a long time ago by European Americans and has been accumulating agreements over the land since the mid-1850s. So getting every one of these projects off the ground involves a lot of vetting and navigating a web of easements and other various restrictions. And we have a very patient legal team that supports on that. Additionally, we ask landowners to sign a project protection agreement over the planting area right along the waterway. That is a 21-year lease or other agreement, and that is needed to ensure time for plants to establish and thrive. And so this does represent a substantial commitment on the part of landowners. And we also bring durability of project environmental benefit through long-term stewardship. So, as I've mentioned, these projects get 20 years of maintenance after planting, and that always includes weed control, but often it also includes interplanting or wildlife browse reduction, or sometimes some other actions. Weeds do come back over that entire 20-year period. No matter uh, how nice we get control of them early in the project before planting and in their early years, they just keep coming back. They wash from downstream and they just keep showing up. So I believe that having the funding to be consistent with weed control is a lot of where the long-term success of these projects come from. That is a real luxury. In addition, these projects get 20 years of monitoring. They each must meet performance standards that are indicators of a healthy riparian forest. And we do get third-party oversight and verification to back up this long-term tracking to confirm that these environmental benefits are real. So I'm an ecologist. I like plants and dirt. That's my background. And what I do for fun, I get to mess with plants and get muddy. And I think it's kind of funny that I'm here talking about funding and policy. But I would say that planting a tree can get complicated because what we're trying to do is engage with and overcome numerous barriers along the way. And this Upper Willamette Shade Program is one way that we're trying to move restoration into the mainstream. Is not just an esoteric thing that us tree huggers nerd out on, but we're trying to demonstrate that repairing environmental damage has meaningful benefit for society at large and should be invested in accordingly. And I believe the shade programs offer one pathway to do so. So in closing, a little snapshot of where this program is now. Over the last several years, we put in 5 pilot projects in the ground. Most of those are in the McKenzie, and most have the McKenzie Watershed Council leading implementation. Those pilot projects have been really important for demonstrating proof of concept of restoration for compliance. The MWMC Commission awarded a contract for the full program late last year, which is a very exciting milestone. Since then, we've expanded partnerships to the Coast Fork Willamette Watershed Council, the Middle Fork Willamette Watershed Council, the Long Tom Watershed Council, and the Friends of Buford Park. We have one new project that was planted just a couple months ago at the beginning of November at the Row River Nature Park. You can go over there and check it out. And we've got one at the Howard Buford Recreation Area and one at a private site on the McKenzie to be planted this winter. So we're really excited about planting season coming up. We've got several other projects in development. Another one was just signed on the McKenzie that we're very excited about. And my shameless plug is that we will be looking for another roughly 15 projects to plant by 2027 and maintain them thereafter. So there's my contact information. If you've got an idea for a site that might be a good fit for a program like this, please get in touch. And feel free to get in touch about anything else as well. And with that, I will stop sharing.
Excellent. We have plenty of time for questions here. Anyone have any questions or comments here for Olivia?
I've got one, Chase.
Yeah.
I just wonder, Olivia, does this pretty much block out anybody that's on the north side of the river? Since you really don't, you're going to cut off half the people apparently.
That's a really good question. And yes, it does. And that is, each type of funding has restrictions. And that is the restriction of this particular kind of funding. And so what we've done with this program and others is to bring in other kinds of funding that can restore the North Bank and hopefully make it complementary so we can bring lots of different kinds of funding together for maximum environmental benefit. Good question.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, Todd, I see you got your hand up there.
Yeah, thanks, Chase. Hey, most of you know I work for City of Springfield, and the work I do is 100% in support of the MWMC wastewater program, and it's been a great honor actually to develop this program from the ground up, working hand in hand with the Freshwater Trust from the very early days. Amazing program, very exciting, very cool that we're able to have this relationship with the Freshwater Trust. And importantly, the Pure Water Partners, which is going to kind of get into part of my answer to Wade's question, where we have this opportunity to do the right thing for the environment and the landscape, but come at it from that kind of constrained angle of a government agency. And so all of our relationships with the landowners are through the Freshwater Trust and those Pure Water Partner actors on the ground. And so we fund it. And the Freshwater Trust basically is our steward for holding those funds and making sure they have those land leases, et cetera. But there's no direct governmental, landowner relationship with us, which is a huge benefit. The other part of that is, but these are government funds, they're ratepayer funds, and our commission's very strict on making sure that we do not spend ratepayer dollars on things that do not produce ratepayer benefits. And one of those is shading or trees on the North Bank that don't result in the shade credits for us, right? So it was kind of a complex problem we were working on, realizing that that's great in one aspect, but how do we leverage these projects? We have this funding to do this work. How do we leverage that to actually do that other work and make sure that there's not that void in the landscape, that void in the ecosystem? And that's when we worked with eWeb and the other folks creating the Pure Water Partners from the ground up to say, we're coming in here with this funding. We want to be able to leverage what we're doing and have maybe the same landowner or a landowner on the opposite bank be able to take advantage and say, hey, we're bringing this funding here. That brings more dollars, frees up more dollars of restoration that to be available to do maybe the work on the North Bank for the ecosystem benefits that is not shade credits. So hopefully that helps, Wade. We definitely thought about that and didn't want to go it alone as just a governmental program, but as a ecosystem partnership.
Thank you, Todd. We do just a quick add-on. We do have projects where part of it is planted with the MWMC shade funding, and then other parts of the forest are replanted using Pure Water Partners or other funding. So kind of trying to bring it all together for the good of the environment.
Other questions? Anyone got anything for us?
Chase, this is Mike McDowell. I don't have my video going, but
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any technology on the horizon that could maybe be implemented right, at the point to the source to do water cooling other than shade.
Todd, I think that sounds like a question for you, maybe.
So, Mike, I didn't understand your question, so maybe you can rephrase it. If you're talking about the source, are you talking about the wastewater source?
Well, I'm thinking
other sources of heat?
I was actually thinking of the cooling ponds that the paper mill operates to try to cool their processed water off before they return it to the river. And so, I mean, that seems like pretty crude technology to me. Maybe that's all the better we can do nowadays, but I just wonder if anybody's even discussed improved ways to cool that type of warm water.
Yeah, so I can answer that in part, I think. So I helped co-author along with the U.S. Geological Survey and some a consulting firm, nonprofits this summer, a report that compared like cooling tower technology with riparian shade implementation for cost benefit, to look at the total cost benefit. So one, that was looking at, just what came out of that was very clear documentation that the environmental benefits and the social benefits that we get out of riparian shade is far less expensive than doing those types of mechanical treatments that actually have environmental negatives that go along with it. So, but that said, are there other types of technologies that might be coming along? One thing that I'm hopeful for the future is heat recovery. It's very similar to cooling technologies though right now, but they are getting more efficient with kind of heat pump, heat exchange technologies. And we can take some of that heat out of the source water and transfer it to a place where that heat could have offset another heating demand and reduce that energy input. But I think we're decades away from that. It really depends on the application. The problem is, and I like to explain to folks that, well, an important thing I want to mention is that the riparian shade offsets don't work in every situation. If you actually have a heat source that discharges to the river that is immediately too hot for the river, then you can't offset it by reducing the heat load somewhere else. This is for a watershed-wide problem. And our heat loads that come out is because the temperatures are warmer than the biological criterion for salmon, but we're still talking about high temps like in the 60s. I mean, if I filled your swimming pool with it, you would not want to go swimming in it. It's not hot water by any means. And so when you're talking about temperatures like that, doing a heat recovery exchange, you're not cooling something like an industrial source that's 190 degrees and have a lot of heat exchange you can pull off. So there is that. But the other piece I want to mention, because you mentioned cooling ponds, and that is something I'm still very potentially excited about in the long run as we develop programs to maybe restore gravel pits or floodplain and be able to discharge the clean water into that, do an environmental enhancement restoration, and then have that heat dissipate because it's not an open pond, but a more complex wetland, floodplain where you've got subsurface flows and a lot of shading and that type of stuff going on where you get the cooling of the water and all that environmental and water quality benefit. I think there's a future there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Andy, see your hand up there.
Well, I just wanted to say, what a pleasure. I've only been with the council for a few months and only part of that time working with Olivia and her crew. But when I go out to talk to landowners about these, they've identified some landowners that high priority and I just want to thank Olivia here in front of the council and her crew, Alexis and Monique, and then Joe from our crew. Feel very supportive. They're competent. They're always encouraging and bring such positive energy to the program, and it's kind of hard not to get excited about it. So anyway, Olivia, thank you for making my job. Really, truthfully, it's one of the most fun parts of my job so far. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I'm really happy to work with you. Related to that last question, thanks, Todd, for answering that one. I would add there's an example in Idaho. The Idaho Power Company has the Snake River Stewardship Program, which is a large restoration program for water quality improvement, and they are using tree reforestation along the Snake River and tributaries in a similar way to what I just described for the Upper Willamette, but they are also using some in-stream restoration projects for a similar benefit, like island augmentation and changing the channel dimensions to deepen them and narrow them, which is restoration relative to current conditions back to it's more similar to historical conditions. So That's also been approved for water quality benefits.
Doing well on time. Any other questions for Olivia? Okay then. Well, Olivia, we appreciate it. Really happy to have you working with the Watershed Council. Jared, why don't we go ahead and kick it over to you? I will post a partner list in the chat, and we will move on to partner updates.